All right, let's hit that studio in the sky here. I'm about running on fumes as I'm nearing the end of the day here, Warren. Got myself a nice cup of coffee and wanted to check in to see how things are down in your neck of the nape, your world down there. We got a lot to catch up on. You've been busy.
Yeah, we've been real busy here lately. Of course, it's the end of the school year, so we've been going to schools and doing a lot of end of school presentations, that kind of stuff. We also had our second oil fields worker celebration in Chanute. Had about 100 oil field workers that showed up for that. Gave away, I believe it was $4,900 worth of raffle items to those workers and had a great event there. And those are huge for really just kind of getting people excited about the oil and gas industry. A lot of those workers that are working on the rigs, they don't really understand how the job that they're doing impacts and really plays into every single American's lifestyle that they live every single day. And so these events are really a kind of a way to give them pride in the work that they do and how what they do impacts everything else that's happening in America right now.
Not to get political or stir the pot or anything like that, but I do remember. Oh, this was probably 8 years ago, and I was interviewing. Oh, I don't know if it was Jack Ekstrom or one of his contemporaries from the Colorado area, and they had been in the oil and gas industry their whole life. That's why I name dropped Jack Ekstrom because a lot of people will know that name from the oil and gas industry as a long-standing veteran of the industry. And we were talking about the big cruise shift, the big retirement, how we were ushering in this whole new generation of oil and gas professionals, and some of them are going to be a little bit influenced by the Greta Thunberg, Al Gore climate narrative, and some are going to be influenced by the old Americana oil and gas narrative, and the paychecks are going to dictate it early, but we'll see where where it lands when the when things kind of settle out a little bit. Um, I do wonder how many people that work in the oil and gas industry truly do understand that whole supply chain from the cafe owner to the person that goes out and digs fossils, checks for Native American artifacts to the water recycling person. Um, the oil and gas industry is one of the most remarkable supply chains in the modern era. I mean, there's very few things that would rival it, in my opinion. Now, there might be more. I'm not sure how the circuit chips and computers and those things, I guess, necessarily operate. But when you take a look at for a exploration and a mining type of an industry, I'm not even talking refinery. I'm just talking about the getting it to the refinery. Do you think this generation understands that, or is it just is it paycheck? What do you think there, Warren?
Now, I'm gonna go on 2 points on there that you just made right there.
Yeah,
And one is there is no other supply chain in the world that is even comparable to the oil and gas industry
there isn't, is there?
because any other supply chain that you're talking about, even the ones that you just mentioned, chips or
Yeah.
technology or phones or even the car, automobile, they all involve are a part of the oil and gas supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
Petroleum products are a part of every other supply chain that there is in the world. So it is the most complex supply chain that there is in the world beyond any shadow of a doubt. Second of all, to go to your second point, and I guess I'm gonna make three here. To go to your second point is the fact that you're exactly right in that our industry is such a technical industry. Just a few years ago, I went out and I filmed a well from stake, where you walk out into a pasture and there's just a stake in the ground marking where the well is going to be drilled, to leveling the pad, to be bringing in the drilling rig, to bringing in the drilling crew, all of the tanks, the frac tanks, all of that stuff, drilling the well, getting the well, all the way to completion where it was flowing. And when I was filming that process, filming every step of that process along the way, I guarantee you the vast majority of the people that were working on the well would come up to me and say, "What are you doing?" I'd explain to them what I was doing, and then they would respond to me and say, "When you get done, can I see that?" Because I know what happens right before I get to a well site, and I know what happens right after I leave a well site, but I really don't know what happens in the rest of the process. And I think that's the oil industry through and through. That if you go talk to an accountant, a lawyer, you go talk to a landman, you go talk to a petrochemist, you go talk to any position you want to talk to in the oil industry, they know what revolves around their position and what's on the immediate periphery of their position. But very, very few people in our industry have a comprehensive understanding of a resource in the ground to the lifestyle that we live every single day. And the third point that I'll make off of what you just said is on the great crew change. And you brought up Al Gore and Greta, and really they're not the driving forces behind the great crew change. They may be influencers on how the new people coming into the industry might have a little bit of a divergent opinion. But what a lot of people don't understand is the missing generation that is in the oil and gas industry. The missing generation is my generation, Generation X. We were the ones in the 80s and early 90s. We were the ones who checked out of the oil industry, that didn't go into it, that didn't look at it. And that was a combination of a couple things. One, you had in the 80s, you had a number of really big downturns in the oil and gas industry, which made you had a lot of layoffs, you had a lot of companies that went under, and so it didn't look too appealing from that standpoint. Second, that was the height of the environmental movement, where our Generation X was the first generation that really, by and large, was convinced that the oil and gas industry wasn't going to be here when I'm like I am now, 52 years old. We were convinced it wasn't going to be here. And so my generation is a generation that didn't go into the industry. And so you have the baby boomers that were before us, you have the Generation Y and Z or whatever you want to say after that, that are starting to come into it. They may be influenced by Al Gore and Greta, but our generation was really influenced by that grassroots movement of the environmental movement, where we saw the downturn in the industry and there was a tremendous amount of environmental pressure. And so we said, okay, that's not the industry for us, and we didn't get into it.
I want to go a little bit further on this topic because I think this is very important. And I'd like to add a little more context to what you're talking about. I'm Gen X as well. Gen X Jason, Minnesota 74 is my handle. And
Hello, Jason.
yeah, hey, how you doing? And Gen X will understand those codes, but at any rate, when we were growing up, there was a big push for white collar college jobs, from Michael J. Fox, Secret of My Success, to Wall Street, whether it was G or PG or R or on network television where we only had 3 channels. There was a very big societal push, which is also called manufactured consent, to get Generation X into college and into white collar jobs for safety reasons primarily, but also for paycheck reasons.
Yeah.
Because trade jobs were really looked down upon. And it did start with the baby boomers, with Ed Norton, because they looked down upon plumbers and electricians and a lot of jobs now that you can retire after 2 years on, right? And so the Gen Xers, we were definitely pushed into a certain direction. And now we were bypassed for this whole crew shift. When you take a look at what the baby boomers did, they lined up with the millennials for the crew shift. And that was a little bit jarring for a lot of the Gen Xers. And by the way, It happened in almost every industry, including the president of the United States. We have not had a Gen X president of the United States. And after Donald Trump, if it's a Republican, it'll be J.D. Vance. So we'll skip the Gen X president once again. So Gen X has really not had a voice at the table for a very long time. And now it's a problem because
Yeah.
we were the last generation for critical thinking because we accepted recycling to a certain degree, but we didn't accept all the peak oil propaganda, for example. So we kind of were able to critical think a little bit. So I'm not really coming to a conclusion, Warren, as much as
I'll
I'm
come,
just adding some fuel to the fire.
Now I'll come to the conclusion that you just pulled out a couple points because I'm really advocating for this and hoping people will listen and understand because a lot of people think we have a problem because there's so many baby boomers that are now going on to Social Security and how are we going to pay for that, and they think it's a huge issue, which it is. Don't get me wrong, it's a huge issue. It is nothing compared to when Generation X gets to that age. Why? Because Generation X is the only generation right now that is in adulthood. We are the only generation in adulthood because we were the generation that chose to do things our own way, to kind of go off and do it our own way. We are the only generation out there that had to pay for our own college and take out our own student loans and are now having to pay for our parents in many cases to take care of our parents that are aging and elderly. And we were the only generation that had to begin taking charge of our children's student loans. And so our generation has the debt of our parents, ourselves, and our children. And we're the only generation that has that. A college kid today, if they want to go apply for college, they can only take out a very small amount in loan money, and then their parents have to take out the rest of the money. And so we were the first generation to do that. But we also carry all of our own student debt that we brought into it, and we have our parents that are now aging, and Social Security is such an issue. I think that there is a real financial issue that is coming when our Generation X becomes retirees.
Oh, I think so too. I do
Nothing to
too.
do with oil and gas, but they just since we went down that road.
Well, and somewhat does if their retirement accounts are hooked to it, and
Yeah.
and some of these things are changing. But getting back to some of the changing when it comes to the crew shift in the oil and gas industry, I'm up here in the basically North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota, where we didn't have an oil and gas industry when I was growing up. And I was, 7 hours from the nearest oil rig when the Bakken came around in the mid 2000s. And so when I think about what the opportunities were for someone like me, growing up in the 80s, graduating from high school and college in the 90s, there wasn't a lot because the agriculture industry had gotten consolidated so much that you didn't go work at your uncle's farm anymore. You didn't go and do those types of jobs maybe that the baby boomers did. Now, I could see where if you're in Texas or you're in Louisiana or up in the Marcellus, that you could go work in an oil field because of geography, because there's certain pockets where there was oil and gas work, and those were good paying jobs. Like the agriculture jobs were meant to be in my neck of the woods. Those all went away. And I mean, basically, if you could get a CDL and then drive grain around and drive farm equipment around, but then you were more of a truck driver than you were a farmer or anything along those lines. So when I look at, what we had, Warren, we didn't have anything except go get a college education. The trade jobs just didn't exist. Nowadays, I'm telling kids, don't you dare go to college. Don't you dare. Just use AI and go work in the oil field. You'll be better off. By the time you're 25, go start an In-N-Out franchise. Go start a Subway franchise. You'll do fine that way. I mean, it's just, I'm being a little facetious, but
No,
it's kind of crazy how it's changed, huh?
I think you're exactly right. I mean, our generation, when I graduated from high school, it was just a standard thing. If you could not check the box that you had a college degree, no one cared what your college degree was in. They didn't care what you went to school for. It was just a box that you were checking
Yeah.
off that said I had a college degree. And if you didn't have that box, you were eliminated from the vast majority of jobs that could advance you in life. The world has significantly changed, and there are some jobs. I mean, definitely, I want a geologist to have a college degree. I want them to have an understanding of
Hmm.
geology. There are some jobs where a college degree is absolutely necessary. But I think we're finally coming to a world where we understand that being a plumber, being an electrician, being a welder, even though it doesn't come with a college degree, is every bit as equative to a job that is held by someone who has a college degree, and in many
But
ways, even greater than the person that has a college degree.
I was
And
just
so,
going to say, just
yeah.
because you have a 4 year degree in Romanian art history doesn't mean you're qualified to make more money than a plumber that's got a 9 month
Well,
trade degree. You know what I mean? But that was the logic. That was
I'm
our
gonna
logic
argue.
growing
I'm gonna
up.
argue with you on that. I'm gonna argue with that on that because I have a philosophy degree, and my
Ah,
philosophy degree, I mean, it's absolutely worthless for anything other than saying that you have a philosophy degree and teaching philosophy. And so, but I am going to say that I deserve more money because I have a philosophy degree. So I'm going to argue with you.
no, that's okay because I have a double major. I've got a double degree in mass communications and speech communications. So I should be able to do a masterful job explaining to everybody why I do not have a job, where you will do a great job philosophizing why you do not have a job. And the Romanian literature person will draw us a great picture why they do not have a job, right? So it's just
There you go.
all these college degrees, you don't have jobs anymore. So you got to use your concentration like they say at Harvard. We don't have degrees; we have concentrations. And of course, they have a British accent. But I think it's amazing what's been going on and what's transpiring, and the industry has. I don't know if they've adapted completely, Warren. It's hard. Obviously, they haven't. Nobody adapts 100%. There's obviously it's an ebb and flow situation, but I think from an oil and gas industry standpoint that there is a completely new ideology being ushered in, and I believe it was an ideology the baby boomers fought against, but they are either unaware or they just are too tired, because they invested billions. And carbon capture, for example, was something they fought against for a long time, and now they're lining up to be the top customers of that. And that really was ushered in with the cruise shift at the same time. And so when you look at how a lot of the younger generation has taken over a lot of the conferences, and the younger generation has taken over a lot of um, the events that really amplify the narrative, I almost wonder if the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. And we're at where we're at now, but um, the industry fought against a lot of the direction it was going, and now it just seems, up in North Dakota at the Williston Basin Conference, that's the big topic, is how to get government subsidies, because oil enhanced recovery and carbon capture is the future of oil and gas. At least it is in the Bakken. And 10 years ago, if I would have asked a question like that, Warren, I would have been escorted right out of the room. I mean, so I'm not trying to stir the pot. I'm just pointing out that, when I'm looking at the last 15 years of my interviews, there was a big shift after COVID. And, you know, as a Gen Xer, I notice stuff. I pay attention and I notice stuff. And so I
Yeah.
just kind of felt like the conversation should be had a little bit. I don't know. What's your thought on this?
I think that's a huge difference between the majors and the semi majors and the independents,
Mm-hmm.
what I would call smaller independents,
Mom
because
and pops.
yeah, the mom and pops.
Yeah.
I mean, Kansas, we have over 2,000 oil and gas companies in the state of Kansas. And we're not seeing that in the state of Kansas. And so I think there's a little bit of a role reversal. I think that you had in the majors, you had very much the corporate mindset where if you had your college degree, if you had done the study, if you came in at the right level, then you were open to certain degree, or, certain career paths. If you walked onto a rig out in the field, then you were limited to your career path at how far you could go within the company because of how you entered into the company. I think that I agree with you is beginning to change. That is beginning to change where you're seeing that technical careers are just as valuable as collegiate degrees in the background. On the other side, I think in a lot of the smaller independents, it's not really a role reversal, but it's kind of the opposite from the standpoint of um, in the independents, you've always been able to come in as a rig hand. And if you had the initiative, if you had the ability to work hard and the persistence, many of the independents that are owned by independent oil companies that are owned right now in Kansas, that's where they began. They began on rig floors. They began as lower level geologists. They began as production supervisors. They began on the lower ranks, and as the companies grew, they ended up saving up some money and buying their own company. And that's where they came from. But I think you're seeing the reverse now from the standpoint of the older generation really doesn't have any succession plans. They're not large enough companies to have put in succession plans and being able to pass that down. And so the gap is coming from the standpoint of it's a lot harder to come in as an independent here in Kansas, get on a rig floor, work hard, and be able to take over a company and buy out a company now because the guy that owns the company is going to own it till the day he dies. There's no succession plan that's there. And so I think that you're kind of seeing a little bit of a role reversal where there definitely was a ceiling at if you came in the lower levels in any of the majors as far as how high you could go. And now in the independents, we've got to figure out how to work through that ceiling to where we don't have people that are coming in now and they work their way up into where they're actually running the company, but they're never enabled to be able to take control of the company. Because if you're not able, you can only work in that position so long before you become frustrated and you decide, okay, I'm out. And so I think that there's hurdles on both sides, and I don't think it's one directional in the entire oil industry.
I think it'd be hard to get out of the industry because your market would be so small that odds are, you're renting or leasing or there's someone else's mineral rights, so they're not yours. That you're a lot of times you're drilling, and so a lot of the value in the company then outside of the mineral rights would be the equipment. Well, there's only one industry that can use that equipment. I mean, it's not like it's kind of like farming. Your value's in the land, and if you don't have the right tools to use it, well, it's just a lot of land and upkeep type of a thing. So in that degree, your market would be small too. But in the oil and gas specifically, just because the equipment sales and that sort of thing, that if you didn't have a buyer, that would be hard. I mean, it's not like you can have a normal succession plan like anybody else, really. So it
Yeah, and
would be. Yeah, go
and
ahead.
that's a challenge for smaller producers because we're kind of the end road for that equipment. Being a
Yeah,
smaller producer, you're buying the second-hand equipment, you're buying the third-hand equipment, you're using it, and when you're talking about marginal wells, when the price was down around $55 a barrel, which is we were paying sometimes even almost as low as $50 a barrel much of last year for our oil here in Kansas. A lot of that equipment's laid down. No one's even using it. It's
hmm
the rigs are laid down. No one's changing out equipment, and so there's no market for it because you are the end market for that equipment. And so the equipment's not the issue. Part of the marginal well community is it's all about the production. How many barrels can you produce, and can you produce enough barrels to be able to produce a margin that you can survive on. And so it's all about the production. And you're right. I mean, almost everybody here in Kansas, I know of very few people that own their own mineral rights. It's all leased. We're all paying royalties. And so it's all about making those margins work in the marginal well community.
Kansas mostly vertical stripper wells, correct?
Yeah, Kansas is predominantly stripper wells. We used to be the second leading, have the second most stripper wells of any state in the United States. I think we've dropped down to third now. It's really close, but we are, the top three in stripper wells, and almost all of ours, the vast majority of ours, are vertical wells. We don't have the geology. Our formations are too shallow to really take advantage of horizontal drilling. It's hard to stay within the structure to be able to utilize horizontal drilling. We have some horizontal drilling in a few places here in Kansas, but we're predominantly vertical wells.
You have all that carbon storage potential coming down the line. That's that's
We
going
have
to
a lot
be
of we have a lot of carbon storage potential here, but
mhm.
it is also vastly removed from the carbon production sites and so really it's the transport to those storage facilities that's really the major issue. And that would take incredible government subsidies in order to put together the pipelines and everything else to be able to transport the carbon to get it to the storage facilities. But we have tremendous storage facility capacity.
That's what they're working on in the Bakken right now, actually, is I mean the company that got the contract, Summit Carbon Solutions, they've never built a pipeline in their life, and they got the contract to build the largest carbon pipeline. And it's very political, extremely. And last week they got 200 million for some research on it, and Wyoming's already announced that they're going to do exactly what the Bakken is doing. So once those two states figure out the subsidy push, it'll be in Kansas because you have the geographical storage.
Yeah.
It's like oil. It's already there, and once it's there, it's just when they bring the technology and the politics to extract or store.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see whether the oil industry benefits like they're trying to do in North Dakota by uh, it might be a triple or quadruple dip because there's a 45Q, there's 45Z, there is the the EOR, oil enhanced recovery subsidies. That's why I'm wondering if those would help the oil and gas industry in Kansas, because if they're going to bring this stuff in there, I mean, you might as well get what you can out of it. It's a terrible way to look at it, but you understand what I'm saying? Is
I
that
understand. I
yeah?
understand what you're saying. I think a lot of people don't understand how removed the storage facilities or storage area in Kansas is. The $200 million that you're talking about, that would build less than 20 miles of pipeline.
Oh no, this is just to
The
do research in a
research,
chemistry lab. Yeah, yeah.
and
The pipeline they've already got billions. So yeah, okay, go ahead.
yeah, and so you're talking about a 300 plus mile pipeline from anywhere to get to our storage facility, our storage capabilities here.
How many ethanol plants do you have in Kansas?
Well, and that's the thing is many of our ethanol plants right now, we're already utilizing the carbon from those in secondary recovery efforts in the oil field.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No, I just came from one,
I didn't
and
know that.
yeah, I just came from one in Garden City that is, sends it CO2. They put it right back in the ground. They're using it for secondary recovery for the oil field.
You
So
know, you know
many
that
of them,
I bet it's the is that a stripper vertical vertical stripper are the same thing, right?
no, they're not the same.
They're
Uh,
not. Okay, I apologize. I assume
so
they were.
a stripper well, by definition, is any well that produces 15 barrels of oil or less
I see.
per day. And so, yes, the vast majority of those are vertical wells, but you can have a
Hmm.
lot of vertical wells that produce way more than 15 barrels a day that are not stripper wells.
Okay,
Uh,
I didn't realize that the
and then
terminology
marginal
was that. Okay.
and then marginal well, which a lot of times these three terms get confused. Marginal well can be a well that produces oil at any capacity, but it's defined by economics in the fact that how much does it cost to produce that oil? And if the cost of producing the oil, no matter how much you produce, pushes you within the margins of what you can make money off of the oil to where you are marginally on that line of margin, whether you make money or lose money, then it's considered a marginal well. So you can have a well that produces 20,000 barrels a day, but if it costs so much to get that 20,000 barrels out that it's possible that you could lose money off of it, then you're considered a marginal well.
So this is the issue up in the Bakken where, the people who are going to profit off of the subsidies, they're rolling out the red carpet and lighting fireworks and talking about how they're calling it, cracking the code 2.0. Well, the first cracking the code, they said it was the forever boom, and your grandchildren's grandchildren would be profiting off the Bakken. Well, we're 10 years later and it's busted twice, and they're already calling it a new crack the code. So give us, billions of more dollars. But the people who are against it, the ones who just pointed out all the stuff that I just pointed out, they're the ones saying that the economics aren't even there. So forget the propaganda. Let's just say they're 100% accurate with the propaganda. The numbers still don't work. And
Yeah.
that's what you're telling me is that you guys are doing it down there because they're doing it in western North Dakota down by Bowman, which is the southwest corner, which is what you're talking about. That older that the vertical wells and the older extraction methods in eastern Wyoming and in eastern Montana and eastern western North Dakota. It's a lot like Kansas in terms of the drilling, and that's where they're getting the oil enhancement out there. And it's still exactly like you just said. The numbers just aren't still there. Sometimes it's more or less
No.
cheaper than to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So
No, I
explain
think
explain that a little bit more for me.
yeah. So I think that anytime you go to secondary or tertiary recovery efforts, the idea that you're going to boost oil production is, insane. From the standpoint of you might, yes, when you initially start a water flood or you initially start a CO2 flood or tertiary efforts, chemical work, do a workover, your whole goal is to push that oil well back up to production numbers closer to what it used to produce. There's no doubt about that. But it rarely ever supersedes what it produced in the very beginning. And so, here in Kansas, we've been doing that for a very, very, very long time. And the goal has not really been to up production, but to maintain a level of production within a field and as close as possible to plateau that level of production and maintain that level of production within the field. And you're right, the economics doesn't work, especially when it comes to, and from everything I've seen about CO2, the economics doesn't work when it comes to CO2 recovery or CO2 storage and utilizing CO2 in order for secondary or tertiary recovery efforts. Simply because if it did work, then you wouldn't have to have subsidies for it. The fact that you have to have subsidies for it shows that right now there is no proof that it will elevate oil production in any way, shape, or form that would make it economically sound. And
And these are, by the way, these are direct subsidies too. These are,
yeah,
hey, you get them no matter what you do. These
yeah,
are like no bid contract subsidies, and
yeah,
they're very high. Like
yeah,
I was talking to a gentleman the other day who's in the refining business, and they're tweaking their refinery so they can produce a little bit different of a product and get billions in subsidies a year.
yeah,
That's, I mean, for a business person, well, of course you're going to take the guaranteed money. But what that does, Warren, and I've noticed this over the last 10 years, primarily since COVID, when the government and the nonprofits and the economic developments kind of took over the marketplace, which they did. And I'm not trying to be snarky or facetious, but when you print 2 times the amount of money the country had over 250 years, you print it within 3 years, and you give it to the people that you pick and choose, you can see how the market has changed. And the oil and gas industry, my whole lifetime, I was the end customer. I would buy products and I would fill up my tank. And the oil and gas industry seemed to be at least conscious of that. And I've noticed this in other industries too. So I'm not picking on the oil and gas industry necessarily. This is a broader issue. The end customer seems to be the government now, where they're given grants, a government and then a bank type of a thing. Because once you get the government grant, you then get the bank loan. And then if you go belly up in 3 years, who cares? You walk away. You made a great salary. You were protected because you had it filed in Delaware or whatever. You filed the right paperwork, and oh well, we'll go try another thing. Now let's go get a new grant and let's go get a new bank. And this seems to be a lot of the new normal. And I bring it up because the shift of not understanding who the end customer is, or the shift of the end customer, that has changed so much out in the marketplace, and has changed so much how people are communicating, how businesses are treating each other. Do you get any comments on that at all? You got anything to say on that?
I'll disagree with you just a little bit. I agree with you mostly, but I'll disagree with you just a little bit in the fact that, with the exception of oil, traditional oil and gas products, traditional oil and gas activities, production, refining, gasoline, those types of things. With the exception of those, you're exactly right. Everything else is being driven by government, is being driven by speculation, and those types of things. But when it comes to, like here in Kansas, the independent oil and gas producer, I know very few oil and gas producers here in Kansas. The few of them own ethanol plants, or they may have other industries outside of the oil and gas industry that are receiving subsidies, but none of them receive subsidies for anything they do in the oil and gas industry here in Kansas. Zero whatsoever. And so, I think that that's an important point to be made, that a lot of the subsidies that people talk about going to oil and gas companies is not going towards oil and gas production. It's subsidies for biofuels. It's subsidies for CO2 capture. It's subsidies for environmental initiatives that they're doing in wetlands and stuff like that the average oil and gas producer doesn't do and does not get any subsidies for whatsoever. But they're paid these subsidies for all these things that are non-related to the oil and gas industry. And then it's broadcast across that the oil and gas industry gets X amount of money in subsidies from the government. Those subsidies are for things other than oil and gas production. And so I think that, when it comes to oil and gas production, we are still very much a supply and demand marketplace that is here. Look at where we're at right now. I mean, where we're at right now here in Kansas, we got over $4 gallon gasoline here in Kansas because of the disruption that's taken place at the Strait of Hormuz. And everyone's coming to the United States to buy our oil. Our exports went up by 30%. And so that increases the demand on our oil, which raises those prices. That has nothing to do with the government, has nothing to do with subsidies. That's just the marketplace responding. It does have a little bit to do with futures trading and people trying to bet on where they think oil and gas is going to go and betting it up or betting it down. But the vast majority of it's just driven straight by supply and demand. And so from that standpoint, it really is been focused on the consumer, because there's two components of it. One is the supply side, and the United States we're still the largest producer of oil in the world. Month over month, for many of the months of the past year, we've produced record amounts of oil here in the United States. So the industry here in the United States has done its job on the supply side. On the demand side, which is the consumer, on the demand side, that has greatly increased, not because Americans have really changed, but because other nations are now coming and competing with Americans for that same oil. And so, it still very much is consumer driven in the very basics of oil and gas industry.
You think Kansas would ever do a state-run refinery?
I don't think so, no.
In North Dakota, they have a state bank, they have a state mill, and they during the Bakken oil boom, it was floated a few times that the state should do a state refinery. The idea was that it's a very heavy Republican state, but the business economics of it would outweigh the ideology so much. And that's kind of the reason the state bank was created initially, to protect North Dakotans against out of state bankers. And the same thing with the state mill, where that because it was so far to market that the state would buy it. And I'm not, I'm more of a libertarian at core. So, stop signs, I got to take a step back and say, do we really need that? That's how much of a libertarian I
I
am.
think I think that would do nothing but raise prices because
Yeah,
there's nothing
that's my
they
only
can
wonder
do
though,
that
because
it will compete with what the free market can do.
but nowadays the way that a lot of the corporations have so many lobbyists, and they've got nonprofit wings, and they've got um, just this giant yacht moving. Boy, they're almost turning into their own government. A lot of these, but I'm such a big small business proponent that I like the little nimble ships that can move around. I understand the need for the big yachts. I totally understand it, but I like the dinghies too. They make the market move. You know what I mean? So
Well,
anyway, I just thought I'd ask you about that refinery, because it would help out the independents a lot.
I actually don't think it would. I
Okay.
honestly don't think it would, because, especially here in Kansas, um, because anytime you get the state involved in anything, the cost of it go up
Yeah.
extraordinarily. And when the costs go up extraordinarily, then they look for ways to cut costs. And right now, we have out of three refineries here in the state of Kansas, we have two of them that significantly take oil from Kansas producers. The rest of them, the other one, and all three of them together, but especially one of them, they predominantly get their oil from Canada through Cushing, or from the Permian through Cushing, and they use a fuel mix. And I think that if you opened up another state refinery here in Kansas, that when they started looking at the numbers on it, they would probably just go straight to Cushing and pipeline
Yeah.
all of their oil in, which wouldn't help a Kansas producer in any way, shape, or form.
Well, and you've got two refineries there too. In North Dakota, we just have the one in
And we
Bismarck.
have we have
Yeah.
three.
Oh,
We
you have
have
three.
three in the state. Yeah.
Well, yeah, then you've got your market definitely taken care of. That's for sure. No, I was just thinking about the philosophy behind it, because it seems so bizarre to me that in today's day and age, that a geopolitical event 4,000 miles away can affect the gas prices in Kansas or Minnesota or anything along those lines, because we've got every means to, keep it within our own borders, in a lot of cases even within the state borders.
Yeah, and I think that's the danger with a state-owned refinery, which or a government-owned refinery is, and I think that's the danger that what I'm seeing on social media and a lot of people talking about. The Trump administration needs to investigate these oil companies on whether they're gouging the American public with their prices and stuff like that. And I think that a lot of times we forget how amazing hydrocarbons truly are in the form of oil and natural gas. And the fact that when you drive by a liquid natural gas truck that's going down the road, one of those little semis that's going down the road. They're huge semis, but one of them that's going down the road, when it gets to its destination and is converted back into natural gas, that one semi becomes 600 semis of natural gas. It expands that much. It becomes 600 natural gas. You barrel up a barrel of crude oil here in Kansas and you put it on a ship and you ship it over to China. When it gets to China, it left here with Kansas with 42 gallons of oil. When it gets to China, it still has 42 gallons of oil and the same BTU of energy that it had when it left Kansas. That makes it a global commodity where the only way that you can keep it in a specific geographical area, there's only two ways. The only way you can keep it in a geographical area because it is so transportable is one, you compete on the free market and you pay the price that that is better than the price that they can get somewhere else plus transport. You have to meet the price that anyone else is going to pay anywhere else, and therefore they save the transport by keeping it with you. Or two, you have to have government regulation that comes in and says you cannot sell your oil overseas. You cannot sell it outside the state. You have to sell it here. And every time that that has happened, it has destroyed an industry.
Without a doubt. Look what happened to the egg industry. That's it. I mean, those two examples, the sugar industry did exactly the second thing you just said. And in North Dakota, a lot of times our crops will sit for a long time, and you go talk to the people in the pulse crops like beans and lentils and that sort of thing. Man, that expiration is not like, or it goes quick.
Yeah.
So some of those crops, you got to get them to market fast. So your point of 42 barrels is 42 barrels. The BTU doesn't change. That doesn't happen with food.
No.
Every day that thing is picked, it's less value every day, less
Yeah.
energy. And so, well, we got to wrap her up here. I'm taking a look. It's 4 o'clock. So, you got any events coming up you need to plug or you want to plug or anything like that?
We got some great summer events that are coming up. Nothing I really want to plug as far as summer events are coming up. We have, but I do want to say we've just launched uh, a brand new advertising campaign called Glitch, and it looks at how without oil and natural gas we'd have a glitch in school because we wouldn't have the products or the energy to have our schools. It looks at we'd have a glitch in our workplace because we would have the products and the energy, and we'd have a glitch in our homes because we wouldn't have the products and the energy to live the lifestyles we have. We're launching that brand new campaign next week. Really excited about it. It's going to be predominantly a social media campaign, streaming video and streaming media campaign. Really excited about that coming up. Also, our 2 oil field workers celebrations that we've had this year have been huge successes. And so we're happy to announce we're going to do another one in Pratt and another one in Russell in the fall this year. Really excited about those. And we got some good things coming throughout the summer, but we're predominantly going to be focused on a media campaign because summer times when there's schools aren't open, less people are getting together for conferences and that kind of stuff. So that's where we're going to really focus on that streaming campaign where no matter where you go, you'll get a taste of Kansas in your streaming.
So is this going to be like a glitch you're living without oil and gas campaign? Is that what this is going to be like?
It's going to be the commercials start out and they say without oil and natural gas, your school would have a glitch. And then it goes into 96% of the things that you touch every
Hmm.
single day are made from petroleum. And it goes into all of the stats and figures and how it goes into our infrastructure and our economy and our taxes and everything else. And so without it, there would be a huge glitch in your school. There'd be a huge glitch in your home. There'd be a huge glitch in your work.
Are
If
you
we
a Simpsons fan?
do what?
Are you a Simpsons fan?
I I am not.
There's a old Simpsons episode where they were showing one of those film strip movies you watch in school, one of those great educational things, and it was so funny because it was just so ridiculous. It was a world without zinc, and it was going through it. That's what all I was thinking of is like, oh, I hope it's like that Simpsons World Without Zinc video where he tries to start his car and it doesn't work because the turning pin is made of zinc, and he just going through all these obscure things that you take for granted day to day, and little Johnny or Timmy was living
Yeah.
in a world without zinc. It's just
That
so,
that's pretty much what it is. That's
yeah,
pretty much what it
you'll
is,
have to
Zach.
Google it and take a look and
Yeah.
just no, it's a Gen X humor for sure, without a doubt. But well, Warren, we'll have to have you back and make sure that we talk about those oil field celebrations and whatnot, and we'll take a look at the glitch campaign coming around the bend. So thanks for the time today, man.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great one.